Yeah.
Oh my god. This is probably the craziest, like, one of stories I've heard in a long time.
Yeah.
Like, that's you know what? Maybe it's not crazy.
No, it's crazy.
You know why I say this? Hello, y'all. I'm Jen, and this is
Jay.
And together we push play. We are back with another Mr. Ballen reaction for you guys, and this one is titled Dead Girl Comes Back to Life. Let's go.
Today's story is the definition of creepy. It starts somewhat normally, but then slowly spirals into absolute insanity. It is definitely one you will remember. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once or twice every week. So if that's of interest to you, please go into the like button's fridge and dump out their 2-liter of Coke, and then refill the bottle with flat root beer. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Before we get into today's story, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, HelloFresh. The primary reason...
Okay. That's his sponsor, not ours, so I'm going to skip forward.
Okay, let's get into today's story. In 1889, when Karl Tanzler was just 12 years old and living with his family in Dresden, Germany, he had a very strange dream. In this dream, he found himself in this black void where everywhere he looked, it was just nothingness. And then, behind him, he heard footsteps. And so he whips himself around and he looks, and there's this woman dressed in this big, puffy, elegant white dress walking towards him out of the darkness. And when she walks right up in front of him, she comes to a stop, and she introduces herself as Anna Constantia von Brockdorf, who was a real person in the early 1700s. She was a noblewoman in Germany, and she would tell Karl that she is actually a distant relative of his, and that she was here to pass on a very important message. Karl was rooted to the spot. He didn't know if he should be afraid of what she was going to say, or excited, or nervous. But before he could decide, Anna had already turned and was pointing in the direction she had appeared out of. And so Karl turns and looks in the direction she was pointing, and out of this blackness, out of this void, came this woman's face. It was a face detached from a body. It almost looked like a floating picture of a woman's face. And as this face floated closer and closer to them, Karl was immediately struck by just how beautiful this woman was. Her hair was jet black like a raven's feathers, and her skin was white like porcelain. But there was something off about this woman, this floating face. She looked sad and kind of frail. And so as Karl found himself staring at this face, which was now right next to them, Anna spoke to him again. And she would tell Karl that this woman, the floating face, she's going to appear in your life later on, and it is your mission given by God to save her. She's going to be very ill, very sick, and you need to find a way to keep her alive. Then, Karl, in real life...
Fuck that.
Ain't that like some weird stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, that was some weird shit.
Like, he hears footsteps behind him. He turns around. He sees like
There's
this
a
ghost woman
there.
that says a name, and then she points, and
She was a noble
he sees
woman.
a floating picture, or well, what looked like a
floating
picture.
head that looked like a picture.
And then he gets the message to save this woman. Like, that's some creepy
I ain't
stuff.
He really been smoking some good shit. Just saying.
But anyways, okay.
Woke up, and immediately he was struck by just how visceral that dream had been. It really felt like that had just happened to him, but after a few moments it seemed like, okay, that was just a dream. But unlike other visceral dreams he had had in the past, this one did not gradually fade from his memory. Instead, over the course of that day, the memory specifically of the raven-haired woman's face really seemed to become more clear and more concrete in his mind, to the point where at the end of that day, he could easily remember exactly what she looked like. Over the following days and months and years, Carl periodically would have this same dream, this same vision of his distant relative Anna, who would come out of the void, and she would remind him to be on the lookout for this raven-haired woman when God sent her to him. But despite these constant reminders in his dreams, and Carl being ever vigilant to look for this raven-haired woman in real life, he never actually found her. He never met this woman he was supposed to save. Fast forward to 1926. Carl was 39 years old. By this point, he had gotten married, not to the raven-haired woman, but instead to a local woman in Dresden. And the pair had had 2 daughters together, and they lived a simple life. And, by and large, Carl seemed rather content and happy with his life. However, secretly, he was a little disappointed that these dreams, these visions that he was having of Anna and the raven-haired woman, that they had not come true, that it really had just been a dream. That year...
Well, no, because it's not getting true yet.
Did he think he was supposed to marry that woman?
Is he going to have a mistress? What's going on?
Creepy.
Due to an economic downturn in Germany, Carl and his family left Germany and emigrated to the United States, where they believed there would be better opportunities for them. And when they arrived in the United States, they settled in Central Florida. But within a year, Carl and his wife had a severe falling out and they split up. And so Carl would leave the family home in Central Florida and he would resettle several hundred miles south in southern Florida in a town called Key West. And it would be in Key West that Carl would get a job as an X-ray technician at a local hospital, and it would also be in Key West that Carl's life would change forever. Less than a year after settling in Key West, Carl was at the hospital going about his day when an older woman walked into the office, and she said to Carl that she was there to get her daughter, her 21-year-old daughter, an x-ray of her chest because her daughter apparently couldn't stop coughing and they were concerned about it. And so Carl began doing the paperwork with the mother when suddenly the daughter came into the office. And as soon as Carl saw her, he knew immediately that she was the raven-haired woman from his dreams. She walked.
Wow.
That damn raven-haired woman.
But you gotta think, like, it's almost like this thing's been haunting him for years. Could you imagine the feeling he got the second he laid eyes on her?
Yeah.
Could you imagine the chills he got? Like, I probably would have had chills from the top of my head all the way down.
It felt like go down like just the wind going in the
Just
back
like,
of your neck.
oh, like someone's
Boom.
breathing down your neck or something. Like, those kinds of chills.
Yeah.
Because here's something you've seen in your dreams, or like you've kind of wondered if you've even hallucinated it. And then all of a sudden, she's right there in front of you. It's almost like you've had a premonition, you know?
You've been
like, that's
disappointed
crazy.
because you haven't seen her and other, and then all of a sudden, bam.
Yeah. Crazy. Okay.
Walked in and she sat down in a chair, and Carl just stopped what he was doing and stared at the daughter. And then he kind of broke out of it and turned his attention back to the mother, and he said to her, "Ma'am, don't worry. I will do everything in my power to save your daughter's life." Now, the mother didn't know what was wrong with her daughter, and so this was both really helpful that this man she was talking to was so willing to help, and also kind of ominous that he was already insinuating that she could be dying. But either way, the mother said, "Thank you very much, we really appreciate that." And so Carl and the mother, they finished their paperwork, and then Carl quickly left from behind his desk and hustled over to the daughter, and he introduced himself and he reiterated that she was in good hands. And the daughter was a little bit weirded out by this, but she was polite and said thank you, and she said her name was Elena. And so Carl would...
I mean, do you blame them?
No.
I think if someone was like that eager to help, I think I probably would have been a little creeped out too.
Yeah.
Or my intuition might have kicked in and I might have had this really weird gut feeling that, yeah.
would take Elena and bring her back and give her the x-ray, and unfortunately he would discover through this x-ray that she had tuberculosis. Today, that disease is easily curable, but at the time, that was a death sentence. When Carl saw this, though, in a weird way, it almost made him happy, because this was another indication that, this really was the raven-haired woman from his dreams. Not only did she look the part, but she also had arrived in desperate need of help. And so now Carl needed to find a way to save her, even though he was just an x-ray technician. He was not a doctor, and so he had no clue how to begin to treat tuberculosis. But that didn't stop Carl. Over the next year, Carl would be in touch with Elena and her family on a near daily basis, updating them on all of the new techniques to fight tuberculosis that he was doing all this research on, and he would tell them about experimental procedures and drugs they could try, even sometimes paying out of pocket for them to go try them. He would also bring Elena into the office as often as he possibly could to x-ray her again and again and again to...
I'm kind of curious, how many people, if you had a dream or something like that, and you don't know if you're talking to God, the devil, an angel, whatever you want to call it, and it's hey, when you see this person, do everything you can to save their life. How many of you would actually act on that?
I don't think I would try to be anywhere near it.
How many of you would get the goosebumps and then just leave the situation? Or would you follow through on it? Yeah, I'm just kind of curious. I think I would be the type of person, since I was asked to save her life, I would probably try to save her life, but at the same time, I'd be questioning it the whole way.
I ain't no hero.
Now, if I was asked to, murder the person, or stop them, or kill them, or something, then...
Oh, my God.
Yeah, no, I might turn an eye to that, because that's wrong. But, yeah, I don't know, that's just... It's one of those things, what would you do? So, okay.
To the office as often as he possibly could to x-ray her again and again and again to see if perhaps she was making good progress. But unfortunately, over the course of that year where he was doing everything he could, it just didn't work. The disease ravaged Elena's body, and on October 31st, 1931, so roughly a year after Carl had first met Elena would unfortunately pass away. Elena's family was devastated by this, but their grief didn't even compare to Carl's grief. It was like Carl had lost his life too. He couldn't believe he had failed his mission and let the raven-haired woman die. When it came time to bury Elena, Carl said, "Let me pay for the most elaborate gravesite we can possibly make. Let me set up a mausoleum for her." A mausoleum is an external building that sits in a cemetery that effectively serves as a kind of shrine to the deceased. And so her...
Usually there's way more than one person, I don't know. Because you get your own little personal one, that's cool as shit.
You gotta wonder how the family feels. Here's this stranger, and I wonder at any point did he tell them about their dream, or his hallucination, or whatever you want to call it, as to why he's taken such an interest in her case, and did he ever explain this to the family, or did they just think he was some weirdo that just wanted to help? There's some missing pieces right here, but maybe Mr. Ballen will put it together for us.
Let's put it together.
Because you gotta think that's crazy. I'd hate to be in their position and their daughter die, but to have a complete stranger that's been helping out for a year trying, to offer to pay for a mausoleum. That's crazy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Family, they understood that Carl had become very, very close with Elena, although they didn't fully understand the relationship. But they did understand she meant a lot to him, and so they agreed to let him do this. After Elena was buried inside of this small temple that Carl had built for her, Carl began spending virtually all of his time kneeling inside of it, crying and begging for Elena's forgiveness. Elena's family was well aware that Carl was doing this, and at first they kind of just let it happen. But, after several months, they began to tell Carl, you really need to let her go. You need to begin to move on. But Carl refused. In fact, over time, he only became more and more obsessed with Elena. Finally, after 7 years of Carl doing this, Elena's family decided, enough is enough. He really needs to stop making her loss all about him. It's not his loss, it's our loss. We're her family. And so the family decided the only way to kind of get Carl to stop doing what he was doing is to demand he give the key back that gave him access into the small area inside of the mausoleum. So one night, Elena's sister, whose name was Florinda, decided to go over to Carl's house unannounced and confront him and get the key back from him. And so she hopped in her car and she drove over to his property. His house was kind of set back off the road behind some trees, and so you had to drive down this kind of winding driveway to get to it. And so Florinda turned onto his driveway and she began driving, and when his house came into view, the first thing she noticed was a number of the windows on the first floor were all lit up. Clearly Carl was home, and as she's driving towards the house, she's just looking in these windows, and for a second she sees Carl, and he's very elegantly dressed in a suit or a tuxedo, and he's ballroom dancing with this woman who's also very elegantly dressed as well. And for a second, Florinda considered turning around and not disturbing him, but then she thought, you know what, this has been going on for so long, I just need to get this over with. And so she drove her car and stopped in front of Carl's house. She hopped out, she walked up onto his porch, and she knocked on his front door. Inside, she could hear music was clearly playing, but just a few seconds after she had knocked, the music was cut off, and then no one came to the door. And so Florinda knows there's people inside this house, and so she knocks again, but again, there's no movement in the house. It's just silent, as if the people inside are pretending not to be there. And so finally, frustrated, Florinda knocks on the door a third time and says, Carl, I know you're in there. I have to talk to you about my sister. Please come out here. And so finally, she heard the shuffling of feet, and then she heard the sound of the door unlocking, and it opened up just a crack. And through this crack, Carl looked through, and he looked out at Florinda very suspiciously, and he said to her, what do you want? And Florinda would say, look, I'm here to talk to you about my sister. Can I please come inside for a second, or can you come out here and talk to me? But Carl pretty much immediately said no, and then he shut the door. However, before he shut the door, Carl had very briefly stepped out of the way, allowing Florinda to see through that gap into the house. So before the door actually shut, she got to see who and what was inside that house. And what she saw was the woman Carl had been dancing with, and the woman was seated in a chair maybe halfway through the house, and she was facing the door. And Florinda knew immediately it was her sister. And so she's...
What? 7 years? His,
Why was he going in there and crying if that... okay.
What?
I'm lost.
This is taking a twist, a whole nother way. I couldn't imagine, losing my sister 7 years ago and then, seeing her in this dude's house who took such a crazy interest in her, built her a mausoleum and everything, and for me to show up to his house and then see my sister in there, I'm coming through that door. I'm not, oh my gosh.
Poor old man, you done killed him. What if he was trying to help her? What if she was in imminent danger and he helped her get away? Safe shit.
What, he helped her fake her death?
Yeah.
That would be an even more twist.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Conspiracy, by God. Let's go. Shit.
That, well then I would have so many more questions. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you, it would bring up so many other things. But anyways, okay. Wow.
She's standing on the porch having no idea what to make of what she's just discovered. And so feeling kind of overwhelmed, she just kind of staggered off the front porch. She turned around, she ran into her car, and she drove off to tell the police. When the police came back, they knocked on the front door and they demanded that Carl let them see the woman he was there with. And so at this point, Carl knew the gig was up, and so he opened the door and he allowed them to come inside. And when the police went inside, they saw the woman he was with, and sure enough, it was Elena. However, Elena was deceased and had been for 7 years. After her death, Carl said he was able to talk to her inside of her.
He done took the girl's money. He took that one saying too far.
Oh my God.
I wonder
Like,
what he was doing.
I don't even know where to go with this one. So, like, was this the plan all along? Like, was the, like,
I
was,
wonder if he killed her.
oh my gosh, that, like, I'm in shock. Like, I like, for the first time in a little while, like, I'm speechless. Like, I don't even know what to say to that.
I'm ready to find out some more.
Wow. Okay, that's crazy. I can say that.
Mausoleum. And so that was why he was going back there every single night, because he and Elena were spending time together. And then at some point in 1933, so 2 years after Elena has been dead and buried, Carl would say she told him while he was visiting her mausoleum that she didn't like being in the mausoleum and that she wanted to come back with him and stay at his house. And so the following day, Carl had shown up with a child's wagon, and he pulled her out of her coffin, pulled her out of the mausoleum, put her corpse in this wagon, and wheeled her back to his house. He had continued to go to the mausoleum every night for the next 5 years just to keep up appearances. But Elena's body never went back inside of it. She would stay at his house, where he painstakingly attempted to restore Elena's very badly decomposed body to its original form. He strung piano wire through her entire body.
Yeah. About that.
Real photo of Elena's mummified body.
Yeah. Yeah, he was. Yeah. This guy. Don't be that guy. It's not good to be that guy.
This is like 7 years later, too. Like, oh my gosh. Did this man, like, have a mental disorder? It's illegal to, what, like, say, exhume a body from a grave? Like,
but he didn't give a shit.
did he think she was going to come back alive? Did he believe this, she was alive?
Push the damn button. I don't know.
Like, what was he thinking? Like, this is really creepy, y'all. Like, it looks like he's even done her makeup. He's obviously dressed her. Like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna push play because this is kind of creepy. I can't look at it no more.
Body, connecting all of her bones together to keep her skeleton intact. He replaced her eyes with glass eyes, and he began rubbing the special wax all over her skin. He also stuffed her insides full of rags in order to give her a full, natural look, and he constantly sprayed her with perfume to reduce the smell. Once she was, in his eyes, back to normal, he began spending as much time with her as he possibly could. He would change her outfits constantly, he would put on makeup, and he would give her new jewelry, and he would talk to her about the ups and downs of life. He would laugh with her, he would cry with her, he would sleep with her. Carl would admit that ultimately his goal with keeping Elena in his home was to eventually still save her life. He believed if he could somehow get her body up into the stratosphere, that the radiation up there would bring her back to life. And if he could do that, he would be fulfilled.
Oh, that dude.
Wow, y'all. Okay, just this is probably the craziest, like, one of stories I've heard in a long time.
Yeah.
Like, that's you know what? Maybe it's not crazy.
No, it's crazy.
You know why I say this? Aren't there other countries where they kind of do similar practices?
Yeah. The death culture. What is that? The death tribes and stuff.
I don't know. Like, I've heard of other cultures where they still go back and they visit.
They put them in caves and all kinds of stuff too.
So maybe we're the crazy ones for thinking they're crazy. Yeah, no,
they're crazy. Yeah.
All right, y'all. Let's go.
Fulfilling his God-given mission to protect her. But Carl never got a chance to launch her into the stratosphere. Instead, he was charged with wantonly and maliciously destroying a grave and removing a body without authorization. However, these charges would be dropped and Carl would be set free. As for Elena, her body was returned to her family and they would bury her in Key West. So that's going to do it, guys. If you got something...
At least he got to keep his, what they call it again, music mausoleum. What's that word?
The family got to keep the mausoleum.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's... Wow. Like, what would drive someone to do that?
I guess he just was so driven he wanted to try to... I don't know. I guess it's how much faith you have, I guess. And he was real religious.
Are we sure he didn't make up that story of the hearing the footsteps and then seeing that old ancestor and then showing the picture of the head? Are we sure he wasn't like crazy and he was so emotionally messed up from his ex-wife and seen that woman and he was just like, oh, she's gonna die anyway. Here, she's so beautiful, and he was more of like the stalker type.
And he ultimately ended up killing her.
Man, this is wild, y'all. Like, I'm just like...
We just totally reread the end of the story.
I know. I'm going to be... Yeah, Mr. Ballen, you were right. This is definitely a story I won't forget. Nope. And that picture is going to be forever fried in my brain. Fried or whatever word I'm thinking.
It's cool.
Stamped.
My brain might be fried.
Left there. Yeah. Like, that's crazy. Oh my gosh. Like, I thought this was going to be like a ghost story of like someone that died for a few minutes and saw some crazy stuff and then came back alive.
No, she came back, was kicking it on the corner, but dude, she was like...
I mean, you got to think of the time it took him to take piano wire and like tie her bones together.
I wonder how he got the skin to regenerate, because he had to make cuts.
He probably sewed it back with the piano wire. There's no telling. I mean...
Yeah, probably. Looking at it.
Could you imagine being in heaven?
No.
And like looking down and like seeing this creep doing this stuff with your body?
No.
Like, I don't know, y'all. Anyways, that was Mr. Ballen. Dead girl comes back to life. That was crazy. If y'all like this video and you want to see more reactions like this, give us a thumbs up. Let us know something down in the comments down below. Go give Mr. Ballen's video a thumbs up. You know, I don't know what else to say. I'm just like, this is crazy. Oh. Well, anyways, we'll see y'all on the next video. Until next time, bye.
Understood that Carl had become very, very close.
That scratching is super loud.
But you know what? It felt amazing, and my face was itchy.
I bet it did. I'm gonna go back probably like 10 seconds.
Cute.